Hi, I'm Jess, and today I'll be doing my final postmortem on GAM 702. The first point I'd like to cover is the three projects I decided to turn in. I was quite limited on this as the first project did get dropped halfway through development due to a job application as well as overrunning ECs from a previous project. However, going forward, I did try to get a range, having quite a meta, not quite a game as my first submission, so more of a tool or an asset. After we learn about some asset jams, I thought this was quite interesting, and it's not something I actually heard of before this project and this unit. The second was quite just something I quite enjoyed. It was just a level design, kind of narrative design exercise for me. Just kind of getting the ball rolling a bit. The first few prototypes that I've made in quite some time. And the third was probably the furthest leap out of my comfort zone, being an actual published mod on a pre-existing game. That game being Fallout. It's with a engine I had never used before. Um, so it was quite a mammoth undertaking on that one, but I would say all of them I've taken away some important key points for my development from each one. My main design process, it is rather chaotic. I struggle to organize my thoughts well, and I'll make a list. I'll write it down. I'll lose the list. I'll make a new list, or I don't like the way the list looks, so I start making a different list. And by the time like a day or so is over, I have about 5 or 6 different lists, and I'm not sure which one I'm running off anymore. That is something I am planning on changing going forward. Or I keep it all in my head because I'm like, oh, it's so obvious. Like, I'll remember this. I won't remember it. Or I'm like, oh, it's really, really obvious. It's really not. It's obvious to me with the backwards way I tend to think about things, but not so much to everyone else. So I need to improve on my documentation when I am planning, prepping, and producing assets. Um, After that, I always kind of like to have a narrative flair. Like the first project, not so much. That was just a bit of planning, but I really enjoy environmental storytelling through levels, not just your basic narrative dialogue, but I also think subtle narrative and kind of dialogue note based assets can be really helpful into filling in some of the blanks or starting the player asking some questions that are later filled in by small details. Um, I often focus on these small details quite a lot and will spend too much time on something I shouldn't be. That has only been reinforced by these jams. It has been quite a while since someone has told me that. But that is something I will be taking forward, is to sort my brainstorming out, make a nice list, keep one list, do documentation the whole time instead of trying to rush all my documentation at the end. And usually it's a bit shoddy because I've forgotten half the stuff, and the other half I'm like, oh, I don't need to put that in. That's just really basic, but it's not. And that's what I had feedback. So when I showed people stuff, they're like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what is it? What's the purpose? Why did you do this? And I'm like, oh no. Um, I forgot to mention that. So going forward, I will be doing a lot more documentation and a lot more kind of an overview for everything I do. So people looking in have a little bit of context for what's going through my head at the time that I created it. After this, I stopped blocking out. In Unity, I really enjoy using ProBuilder. It's something I'm very comfortable with. I find it quite quick to work with. I can get quite finicky with it, but I've been trying to limit myself more and focus on the larger picture rather than all the small, tiny details that has happened in the before. The modular kit I made for the first of my listed assignments I've handed in, the DIY jam, or as I'm calling it now, the level 0 jam. Start with zero knowledge, you come out with a game. Is I want to keep the modular kit quite basic. Before, when I've made kits, sometimes they have gone completely off the rails. I have 2 different floors, 1 staircase, 2 basic walls, and about 19 to 30 different paneling, crowning, like details. And normally they're quite personal to my taste and style, normally being Victorian or Art Deco, and I didn't really think that would help going forward, I've learned I need to work out the maths of everything, make sure I do a bunch of test scenes so everything fits together, get someone else to have a look at it, get them to find problems for me, and then readjust. So that's I've actually taken that forward and kept everything I've done quite basic on the DIY jam. Um, the second game, the train one, or the end jam that I did want to focus quite heavily on a kind of narrative based experience with the environment telling a lot of the story. I've worked a lot on kind of stealth, horror, kind of FPS games in the past, and a lot of this stuff. It's quite heartbreaking, actually. You work with the writers, you see how much effort they put in, and along the lines, it gets cut out. So I always try and kind of make an example of I'm going to use a lot of narrative. I'm going to make sure their work gets in. I'm going to work it in. So on this one, it was kind of my own little exercise of if I was going to plan this whole thing, if I was going to make all these puzzles, what would be a really nice way to tell this story without words necessarily that would usually just get glossed off or run past. But in this experience, people kind of had to focus on it and kind of had to. It was kind of the key point of the game, which is not a kind of game I've done before. I'll say by far my favourite, and the one that took up a lot of time and did have quite a few restarts because of corrupting files, issues with the actual program. My zero to where I am now learning curve was the Fallout 4 mod. It's a little bit hard to get people to test this one, but once I spent, I think it was 2 days working out how to get my mod to work on my computer so I could test it. I did eventually manage to get it on Nexus and Vortex, which means I can just enable it and go and play in my game, which is actually amazing to see. And to even get my personal feedback on, oh, that looks really out of place, or because I have hundreds and hundreds of hours in that game, and to see something new and a new environment was always my favorite part of the DLC. And to think that I can now go on and create something similar is quite inspiring and has given me quite a bit of passion back, because before it was quite a lot of uni work. It was job assessments and then my job outside of university, and I was just quite tired. And I was like, I really should make something, but I'm absolutely exhausted. And actually being like, I've actually got a Fallout mod in the works. It's actually something I can look at, I can touch in game, I can get my character to fire a gun off at it. It's amazing. I found myself coming home and I'm like, okay, I finished work at 10:30 at night. Let's get on with this. I found it gave me quite a mood boost to what I'm doing and consolidates that, yes, this is something I want to do as a career, as a job. Yeah, I would say it did take away from a bit from the other projects, because as soon as I started this one, I went a bit off the rails, got a little bit crazy with it. It kind of ran over into one of the other jams. I believe it was the end jam. It took away some of the time on that. But I feel like I've had a higher learning experience, a higher learning curve. And I think I've got more value out of this one in comparison to the end jam. It was like it's a lot of new skills for me, basically, and the kit's very similar to Skyrim, but to actually see and be able to make this is incredible for me, and to be able to get feedback from complete strangers online. It's had over 1,000 people have looked at it. There's some people tracking it now. Actually just heard back while I'm recording this video just earlier in the day, right before hand-in, that you can't actually get to where I've created to at the moment because the teleportation has broken. But to be able to just go up and patch and re-upload and update what I've made, add new versions, and it will just sort it all out in engines, amazing, because then I can get more constant feedback from these people. But yeah, I think some of the biggest changes is definitely write everything down. My notes are quite chaotic. Nothing is obvious. Even if it's to me, I'm not going to remember it. So make a note for other people's sake, not just my own. And don't wait till the review stage to publish it. Don't wait till the end to publish it. Publish it as soon as you can get, because that feedback can really inspire you to put more time into it, to work more on it. But especially if you can publish it online and not just for people within the university, you get a much more varied set of comments and feedback from people. And I've quite enjoyed actually looking over that feedback. Normally it's something I'm dreading, but yeah, I say this unit has definitely kicked me back into gear for the year that is to come. I will say over the summer I was probably not as good as I should have been on keeping on top of this, but I ended up with my other job, 50 hours a week working. I didn't have much time for game design, everything slipped. But this unit, the first one, dragged my feet a little bit because it was a lot of writing, it was a lot of kind of essays, a few little game jams that got you back into it. But I think having this by yourself, being expected to make all of these self-directed again, has really gotten me ramped up and raring to go for the rest of the year, and has reiterated things maybe I've forgotten from the last few years, and has brought a few new things to light about my own development processes and how I can better handle that. So yeah, thank you for listening. Hope you have a great day.